Hello and welcome to another episode of ComfyUI for creative professionals. In this series so far, every workflow that we have looked at has been using Stable Diffusion XL or some variant model thereof. And this right here is the very first workflow that we started. This is the basic text-to-image workflow that comes with ComfyUI. Today we're going to talk about a different model that works a little bit differently and it's basically been the best performing text-to-image model that's open weights, and that is Flux. To tell you a little bit about Flux, we can check out the official website. It's a model made by Black Forest Labs, and it comes in a few variants. We can see down here, there is Flux Pro, and it comes with version 1.1 and version 1. And the Flux Pro model is basically the main model that Black Forest Labs has trained, and it is only available through their APIs or via their partners. The alternative for those who want to run Flux as an open weight model, we have Flux Dev and Flux Schnell. Now these are what's called distilled model. That is to say that they have been trained from Flux Pro or potentially from other larger models, and they're basically a more compact model that works a little bit differently from what we've seen, and so we have to adapt our ComfyUI workflows to match those differences. And that's what we're going to look at today. So I have this instance running on InstaSD. We do have a dedicated Flux Dev workflow that you can launch on InstaSD. All you have to do is go to instasd.com, click on Workflows. From the filter, you can choose Flux as the base model. And here you see all the different Flux workflows that are available for you to run with one click. And at the very bottom, it's the very first workflow we're going to be talking about today. It's the Flux Basic workflow. You could just launch this with one click, but we're going to look at how we can slowly transform this workflow into a Flux workflow. So in this instance, I have a Flux model loaded, but if you go to my file explorer and if we look at our checkpoints directory, there's nothing there. And that's usually where we would put the previous Stable Diffusion files that we would download, the models that we would download. But for Flux, we have these files placed in our unit. And the reason for that is what we talked about previously about Flux Dev being a distilled model rather than something like Stable Diffusion. If you look at our typical load checkpoint node, you notice that it has three different outputs. So it has the model, it has a clip, and it has VAE, all bundled into a single file. There are some checkpoints like this for Flux as well, but most of the time Flux comes in separate models. So you have to download them all separately. So if you go back to our file explorer, you see that I have my Flux models in the models unit directory. I have a separate VAE file, this ae.savetensors, and I have two clip text encoders in my clip directory under models. Now for the download location of all of these, you can still go to this workflow page, and if you click on this download button, you can download all of these files directly. If you want to run them locally, you can download them from there. So in this instance, I already have them set up. So this load checkpoint node, which is what we've been used to using, it only looks into the checkpoints directory under models. So if you go under models here and under checkpoints, we saw that there is nothing there. So what do we do if we can't use this node? Well, if I double click anywhere on the canvas, I get this pop-up to pick a node to add to the canvas. I'm going to search for node. And you see here a node as part of Comfy Core. It's called Load Diffusion Model, and that's what we're going to choose. You see that I've already downloaded a few different models here. For this example, we're just going to choose Flux One Dev. And that's it, and that's our model. So we have a replacement for this output here. I can just go ahead and connect it to my model in the K-sampler. We still need to find alternatives for our clip and VAE. And remember that I had already downloaded separate models for those in my models clip directory and also in my VAE directory. So similarly, we're going to have additional nodes to load the clip and load the VAE. Now, for reasons we'll get into later, here there is a load clip node here, but for Flux, we're going to use the dual clip loader. It's also part of Comfy node. And we're going to pick our T5XXL FP16.safe tensors. Again, if you want to know where these files come from and you want to download them for yourself, this workflow page will be in the show notes, and you can go there and you can just click download right from the workflow page. Okay, so now we have our clip loader. We got to make sure that on this dual clip loader we pick Flux as our type. And lastly, we need to load VAE, and that's a dedicated node as well. And it has already selected the one AE.safe tensors that we had downloaded in our VAE directory. And I have to go ahead and hook that up to my VAE decode and hook up my clip. There we go. And now I can delete this load checkpoint. Just to run a test, let me just run this. Actually, let me make sure we get the dimensions right for our latent image. And let me just run this and see what we get as it is. Okay, so we have our first Flux generation, and this is the same prompt that we've been using as a test. It comes with ComfyUI. So it's the famous galaxy in a bottle scene. So, and this is our first output from Flux, and you can see that it's not a great image. It was very blurry, and yeah, just all around not a great image. So what's happening? Well, Flux, like we said, works fundamentally differently from Stable Diffusion, and we need to adapt our workflow for it. So we've already done that a little bit with loading these models individually, but what we still have left is the negative prompt and a CFG. Now, remember I said that Flux comes in 4 different variants, or really 3 different variants. It has the Pro, the Dev, and the Schnell. The Schnell model is basically the smallest and the fastest of the models, but it might compromise quality a little bit. The Dev is basically the most powerful open weight model that is out there, which is what we're using right now. And the Pro is the most powerful model that is only available via the API. Now, Flux, Dev, and Schnell, they're distilled models. So we don't have to get into exactly what that means, but one of the things that it means is that they don't accept negative prompts. And as a consequences of that, this is has to do with kind of their technical implementation. Because they don't accept negative prompts, you also can't have a CFG value here. So the first thing I'm doing here is get rid of the negative prompt, and I'm going to go ahead and collapse this node. And I'm going to set the CFG to 1. Essentially what's happening under the hood, this value is a multiplier when the K-sampler is doing its calculations, and so essentially setting it to 1 means that it'll do nothing. So let's go ahead and run it again and see what we get this time. There you go. So you can see that that's a much better image from the state-of-the-art image generation model. So remember that with CFG, it allowed us to control how much the model would adhere to our prompt. And with Flux, we can't really use the same thing. But there is another tool that we can use. If I double click on my canvas to bring up the node selector, and I choose Flux guidance, this is another tool that we have for these distilled Flux models that allows us to change the level of adherence. But you can see that it actually just changes our conditioning. So what I can do is I can plug it in between my text encode node and my sampler conditioning. So let's try that. And in every workflow that's published by Black Forest Labs, they set this value to 3.5. So let's run it once with that and just see what happens. I have my seed fixed here so that we don't get random variations. We can see what our guidance changes are doing. Okay, so with that, we just got the same thing as we were getting before. Now let me see what happens if I set this to a very low value. Or a much higher value. Interesting, so you can see that with a very high value, it's basically blocked out everything that's not the main subject. I wonder if that's a constant feature. We can change the prompt. I'm going to change the prompt a little bit so we can see what exactly this Flux guidance can do for us. So I'm setting it to 3.5, which is the default value that is typically set to. Okay, this prompt was supposed to be inspired by the closing scene of There Will Be Blood. So it is a little bit violent. Let's see what happens when we set the guidance to 1. Okay, so you can see that's not a very good image, and if we set it to 6. Interestingly, by setting it to 1, it has basically set it to some kind of drawing style. And this is just overdone. Now there is one more detail that we need to talk about to really get good quality images out of Flux, and that is a node called Model Sampling Flux. So I'm going to double click on the canvas here and search for model sampling and add model sampling Flux. So you notice that this node takes a model and produces a model. So that would stand to reason that it would sit between our model and where the model is to be used. And you would notice that it also takes the width and the height of the image. We already have the width and the height here, so these are set to the same value, so we don't have to worry about it. If we wanted to just make sure that we can set the width and the height in one place without having to set it each time on each of these nodes, what we can do is we can add a primitive node. I have a I have a node pack here called Chris Tools, which is helpful in this example. Here, if you want to install it and you don't have it already, you can go to Custom Nodes Manager and search for ComfyUI Chris Tools. So I'm going to search for primitive integer, and I'm going to set it to 1024. I'm going to right click and clone this node because right now we have the width and the height values both set to 1024. I'm going to connect that node to the width of my empty latent image and similarly to the height. And then I'm going to do the same for the model sampling Flux node that we just added. I can also give this node a name. And now I can just set the width and the height in one place without having to repeat it on the two nodes. But more importantly, what does this model sampling Flux do? We don't need to go too deep into the details of how it works under the hood. The important thing is that it basically changes the computation that the model does under the hood in order to remove certain artifacts in various types of images. That's kind of the best I can describe it. We can go ahead and run the generation again, and I would expect that we wouldn't see too much of a difference here. And it's basically the same image. For certain types of images, you would expect this node will make a bit of a difference to your output, but it's quite minor. So with that, we've basically taken our original text-to-image workflow that we had with Stable Diffusion XL, and we've basically adapted it for Flux. So it looks a little bit more complicated because Flux really breaks things out far more explicitly. We've had 3 nodes where we used to have one for load checkpoint. We have this Flux guidance node, which most of the time we can even just ignore and just leave it at 3.5. And we need this additional node in between to make sure that our model works well in most images. But really, it's not that different from the previous text-to-image node workflows that we have seen. I want to show you guys the actual official workflow that has been published by Black Forest Labs. And this is the one that if you go to the workflow page that I shared previously on InstaSD, this is the one that you would be running. And that's this workflow right here. Let me add a different prompt here so we can look at a more pretty image. And I'm gonna randomize my seed. This workflow is not that different from what we were just looking at. The main difference is that we don't have a K-sampler here, the K-sampler that we were used to previously. Instead, we have this sampler custom advanced node. We can look at what the inputs to these are. So on this side of the workflow, we have the 3 nodes that we were previously looking at, and that's not any different. Here we have our prompt encoder, and that goes into the Flux guidance node just like we saw previously. The sampler custom advanced, you notice that it doesn't actually take a conditioning node, it takes a guider. And this is again another Flux specific element. We have a basic guider node that takes our model and the conditioning and produces the guider. So that's what we use to hook this up. Additionally, all the things that used to be explicit widgets on our K-sampler node are now inputs in this node. So it's actually not that different. It's just that a lot of the inputs are explicitly broken out. So this noise is basically our noise seed, which was previously just widgets on the K-sampler. So we need this additional node that is a random noise node and allows you to fix it or set it to randomize after each generation. We have our K-sampler selection. We have our scheduler, which is basically what we were previously having here on the K-sampler with the scheduler and the sampler. And then we have the model sampling Flux, which is what we were just looking at in the previous workflow. So all in all, this looks a lot more complicated, but it's nothing to be afraid of. It's just that a lot of the things that used to be configurations have now been explicitly broken up and are in separate nodes. I find this personally a little bit more messy, and I don't really see the rationale for it, but this seems to be the Flux way for a lot of the workflows that they put out. So you might see a lot of proliferation of nodes, but it's the same structure overall. You have your prompt that is being encoded and fed into a sampler with some noise and getting denoised at the end with a VAE and getting decoded into this image. So that's all for part 1. What we're going to talk about next will be how to do image to image and how to do LoRa's and control nets with Flux. So if you want to see those, stay tuned. If you want to run this workflow easily with one click, you can do that at the link that I paste in the description on InstaSD, or you can go there and download all the models and get set up with them on your own computer. And with that, I will talk to you next time.